Welcome back to the Obi-Wan channel. I wanted to give a weekend update, I guess, basically, to the Junkyard Dawg 302 engine that I'm building here. I wanted to just kind of give you an update on the parts and whatnot that I've got, and also give you, as I promised, the inspiration as to why I'm doing this. So, first, let me start off with the inspiration real quick, it's a real quick story. So basically, about 20 years ago, I was at a body shop, and this guy was in my hometown. He had a flood go through his place, right? And what happened was that there was a Lincoln Versailles, 1978 Lincoln Versailles in there that had been flooded. It was in the ditch, and it was underwater, so to speak, and they had drained it out and drug it out of the ditch, and it was sitting there in his parking lot. And he basically, I showed up one day, and I kind of just saw it from a distance, and I knew back before the internet, when you used to read magazine articles like, you know, Muscle Mustangs and Fast Forwards and all that other stuff. I remember them saying something about, hey, if you ever find a Lincoln Versailles of a certain particular year, they have a 9-inch axle with rear disc brakes, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, wow, hey, I think that's a Lincoln Versailles. I bet it has disc brakes in it. And I mentioned something to him, and I said, hey, you keeping that around or anything? He said, nah, we just pulled it out of that ditch in behind my house. Remember, we had that big old flood. I'm like, yeah, okay. He goes, yeah, it's flooded, dude. And I'm like, I don't care. I mean, you know, I'll just take it for the axle and the disc brake setup. At least I got all the brackets and hardware. And we made a deal. I don't remember how much I got it for, but I ended up grabbing it. Longer story, even shorter. I basically had a 302 in my Mustang 302, actually, the one that came out of this car, as a matter of fact. I swapped it over into my F-150, 78 150, and one night, here's another lesson for you, by the way. One night, it was about, I don't know, probably 0 degrees, I would imagine. Went out, jumped in it, started it up. It was carbureted, and it was, you know, struggling to run. I was just pumping the accelerator to keep it going. Backed up, went down to the stop sign at the bottom of the hill, and laid into it. Well, guess what? This old young kid here learned something real quick, which is, don't do that, because what happened was that the oil hadn't been, the engine wasn't warmed up, and the piston pin, the pressed in pin, galled up one of the pistons really bad, came out of the bottom of the piston, and swung around, basically, hit the side of the block right here. I think it was actually one of these two pistons up here. Hit the side of the block here, broke the block, broke the crank right here, lifted this thing up and out. I mean, it didn't actually fly out, but it lifted it out, broke the whole timing cover assembly, etc. Destroyed that engine. So I needed an engine really fast. And at the time, I didn't have anything ready, and I didn't really have anything available except for that 1978 Lincoln Versailles 302. So I kind of said, you know what? I'm just going to go. I mean, it was in a flood, yeah. It was about 6-8 months ago. You know, I mean, it was running, I guess, up until that point. Shouldn't be no problem, right? So I go out there with a torch and a forklift. I'm flipping this thing upside down. I'm tearing out the engine, the transmission, the axle that I originally wanted. I'm parting this car out. I get the engine on a stand, and I start taking it apart, and lo and behold, yeah, it was in a flood, all right. It was in a flood, and it was full of sand, and it had rusted really good. So I wanted to do the same thing. I wanted to get that engine out, and I wanted to drop it in my pickup right away, because I needed an engine really bad, because it was how I got to work. And I thought maybe I could pull it out and I could just, you know, simply run it. But I couldn't turn the crank over, which is what led me to say, all right, I need to take some stuff apart. And when I took the 2-barrel carburetor off, that's when I saw the sand and everything. And then I started taking the intake off, and then there was just again, sand was just going everywhere, and pulled the heads off, and sand inside the cylinders, and water still sitting in there, and moisture. and the cylinder walls were rusted. You did not see any of that cross hatching at all. A lot of times, when you keep an engine, oiled and everything, you can, even when they're older, they look pretty good. Even after years' time, you can see the old cross hatching a lot of times. Well, come to find out, this thing was rusted up really good. Wherever the piston had stopped from the top of the piston up, or the first set of rings rather up, it rusted really good. I didn't know anything at the time. I wasn't, I was pretty dumb, pretty naive, pretty, new. And some guy, I think the physical therapist of my mother, said, "Hey, use Coca-Cola to get rid of the rust and free that thing up." So I poured 2-liter bottles of Coke in it and let it sit for like a couple days, which, again, I need this engine, because I got to get to work, I got to use this pickup. And I managed to get it freed up, but it wasn't the Coke that did it. Today I would use vinegar or something of that nature, but I didn't know that then, okay? But I mean, it took hammering. I basically took a hammer, a wooden handle like this, and I think I had a steel hammer or whatever, but I took the wooden handle portion, or maybe even a 2x4, I think, and I put it on top of the piston, and I was hammering it with a sledgehammer, literally, to break them all loose. And it took me about an hour after soaking the cylinders with Coke on both sides for at least a day each. And then I was hammering, literally hammering as hard as I could with that wooden handle, the hammer, or the 2x4 on top of all the pistons to get them all broke loose. And I finally got that thing to turn over. And of course the rings and the pistons themselves, scraped out all that rust and sand and everything. And then I finally managed to, take the rods out, pull the pistons out, pull the old rings out. The rings, by the way, they were just, all of them were stuck inside the pistons. I really had to dig them out. And, by this point, people are thinking, well, why didn't you just rebuild another engine? And again, I had no other core. I had nothing. And I just didn't want to go out and spend a whole bunch of money. And I didn't have any money, honestly. The heads off of the engine that blew up, amazingly, they looked okay. In other words, it did not look like the valves had kissed the piston or anything when it all came apart. A story for another day, but eventually, yes, I did find out that something got a little touch, but they look good, okay? So I ended up reusing the heads, is what I'm saying. I bought a Summit overhaul kit with cast iron rings, a gasket set, and I think some new bearings, some tan undersize bearings, because here's the other story, by the way. That 302 that was in the flood was a 60 over unit, which, when people ask me, well, why didn't you rebuild it? I probably would have if I could have, but it was already at 60 over. So, I was like, shit, what am I going to do? So, I got it all apart. I beat it all apart. I got the overhaul kit from Summit Racing at the time. I think I paid, it was less than $150 for everything, the cast iron rings, and I want to even say it was like $80, but I'm not positive. But my point is, I did all of that, the bearings, the new cast iron rings, and the gasket set. I took it all down to a bare block. I took a 3-finger hone. As you can see now, I told you that in this one I did a dingleberry hone with the little balls and everything. At the time I didn't have a dingleberry hone. I had the 3-finger stone hone that kind of springs outward. That's all I had. I think I even went to Napa and bought some brand new coarse stones, like some 60s or 80s maybe. Put them in there. I ground on those cylinders. You could actually see the ring ridge a little bit. This one here you could not. This one here, you can even see that you can't even see where the rings were stopping, because this thing has been barely used at all, this engine right here. It just, the reason why this one here I think got pulled again is because it was all plugged up on the passenger side over there, inside the coolant, and it was probably overheating. But that 60/302 there, I you know, put that hone in there, and I was going at it, scraping them up and everything. I got it to where most all of the cylinders, the major rust was removed. The major pitting was removed. You could still rub your fingers in there and feel a little bit of some pitting in some places, and you could definitely see the rust staining in the walls. I could not get rid of that. I mean, I spent like 2 hours or so just doing all of the cylinders, you know, with that heavy stone, trying to grind them all out, and it just never, ever went away. As far as the rust staining, it was just embedded in those cylinders. And that's when I just said, you know what, I got nothing to lose and I need an engine. Let's just do this. I got all the old rings out. I put the new cast iron rings in. I put everything back together. I had to micro polish the crankshaft. I had a machine shop at that time, so I had a lathe instead of using, you know, this thing right here. I actually had a lathe to put my crank in, and I went ahead and micro polished it up. I reused those old heads. That, by the way, when that engine blew up and broke, it did not damage the camshaft. I brought the camshaft and lifters over to that engine. No, I lie. No, what I did was I had a 351 flat tappet cam from somewhere. That's right. And it was in great shape. I put it in there. I bought new lifters. That's what I did. I remember now. That's why it was like 150 bucks. I had also bought lifters. And I lubed the shit out of that cam and put, which was a used cam, and I put brand new, you know, Summit lifters on it or something like that. And I had to get a new timing chain because obviously the timing chain stretched really bad when that crank broke. You reused those old head. I reused the intake manifold and the carburetor. I do, by the way, though, have that camshaft and lifter set. It did not harm it. I didn't lie completely there. And I have that cam and lifter set in a 289 right now, as a matter of fact. So, ready to run. So, anyway, put all that together, started it up. It ran. Unbelievably, it ran. It used a little bit of oil, probably because the rings were, you know, running over rusty little pits and shit like that. And but it run. And one thing I noticed about that 60/302 is it warmed up pretty fast, from cold to operating temperature pretty quick. But my cooling system seemed to be able to handle it once it reached operating temperature. But other than that, I mean, that thing ran, and it was pretty torquey down low, you know, because it had a 351 Windsor van or truck cam. I think it was an 85 HO 351 F-150 type cam, if I remember right. I think I saved it out of that because I rebuilt a 351 HO for a guy, and we put a different cam in it. But I'm pretty sure that was the cam that was used for. But anyway, it ran, and it ran great. And then that story I told you about the heads, eventually one of the intake valves on those heads started to pop. It started to backfire up through the carburetor under load, like when you were climbing a hill or something like that. And what I would do, and I'm not even kidding you, what I would do is, I have witnesses. I have a buddy of mine, Wes. He used to ride with me. We used to go try to kill that engine. We used to try to destroy that engine, right? What I would do, no joke, is I would put it in first gear, granny low, right? And I would just floor it in this 78 F-150, 4-speed, what it was. I would floor it, and we would hit. It would go up to like 6,200 RPM, and it ran out of breath at that moment. But it would just hold that. And I would hold that for like, I'm not even kidding, 2 miles. I would hold it like that. I was trying to blow the engine up. I really was. I was trying to blow it up again so I have another, you know, experience to talk about. It would not blow. That engine would not quit. But the reason why I did that is because I was hammering that valve up and down so fast and so hard and getting it so hot. And as soon as I got done doing that, guess what? It stopped backfiring up through the carburetor. Yeah, it was funny. But it would stop backfiring up through the carburetor, and then I would, you know, drive it around for, I don't know, about 2 or 3 days, and then all of a sudden it'd start doing it again. I'd do that, and yeah, that's how I fixed it. Put it in granny lower second and just floored it until I reached the max RPM that thing would carry. And believe it or not, like I said, I ended up pulling that engine out after I rebuilt that Mexican block 302, which is buried over there somewhere. But anyway, I rebuilt an engine while I had that engine in my truck using it, and I got it out just in time before that valve became a real problem. But it was getting to a point where even the 6,200 RPM runs wouldn't really fix it for very long, basically. Let's put it that way. And yeah, I was crazy. I was young and dumb and really crazy with that thing, but that is the inspiration behind this Junkyard Dawg right here. Today, well, actually earlier, I got these rods in. These right here, I paid 70 bucks for this, I think, shipped to my door. And they were in pretty good shape, but they were rusty. So I took it over to the bead blasting cabinet, and I have bead blasted them so that way they're all cleaned up. Before I did that, though, of course, I put them on my glass scale here, went to grams, and I basically weighed them all the same. There was one, maybe two that were the lightweight. It was like 558 grams. There were two that were definitely 568 grams. And, excuse me, 560 grams. That's right, only 2 grams apart. And then the rest of them were at 559. So what I ended up doing is I ended up grinding right here on the beams, all the way up and down, top to bottom, to get them all the same weight. And then, because of, you know, all the grind marks and everything on there, I took them over to the blasting cabinet to take the rust off, but also to, you know, stress relieve them, basically, and get rid of the grinding marks. And you can see it did a really good job of that. So these rods right here are my junkyard rods. Supposedly the eBay seller that said that this came out of a match, you know, as a match set out of an engine. When you look at some of these, they're all C8 OEA, you know, rods, but on the backside, I don't know what these numbers mean, but they're not all the same. My Mexican block 302, on the other hand, that one, these are the rods that are out of that one. This is the one I rebuilt to fix that 60/302 junkyard engine that I did years ago. And these really, there's like maybe 3 that are not the same, but I pulled this engine apart myself when I found this thing, and that's a match set. And these were all the forged pistons that were in that engine at the time. So anyway, point being is I got my rods, I got them all balanced as far as what I can do balancing, because I don't plan on actually sending this thing to the balancer. I know if I did, the machine shop is probably going to look at me and tell me that this crank is in need of, you know, grinding, which it is, but I don't want to hear their shit. I mean, I know they're right, but again, I'm going to Junkyard Dawg this thing because I think it can work. And I'm going to take, you know, a 28-ounce crank, 28-ounce flex plate, 28-ounce dampener, which, by the way, I got on the Black Friday special. Speedway Motors had one, an aftermarket PRW brand, I think, for $59 garage sale clearance. So today is, what, November, almost December of 2022. So if you're looking for a clearance dampener, get there, because they have them. At least they had one anyway. And now I'm going to use some rods. They were a match set coming out of an engine, and I've cleaned them up, and I definitely made sure that they were all the same weight as far as grams. And the pistons will arrive here next week, probably tomorrow or Tuesday, and then I'm going to go ahead and start, you know, assembling it all basically at that point. But I still need to take this thing apart one last time and do a major cleaning But for the most part, though, I'm just trying to get everything fitted and trialed, put together. And I got, like I said, the used bearings here. I've been looking at those used rod bearings. I see some, I don't know. I think I might end up actually buying a set of 10 undersized rod bearings and go fresh from there, because I see a couple of them they're really, I don't know how you want to say, worn, but I mean, they look nice and shiny and smooth and all that, but they have gone through a couple layers, so you can start to see that it's worked its way through at least 2 layers. So I don't know if I put them on that crank and they were just too tight or whatever, but anyway, point being is that I'm thinking about actually going with some new rod bearings, 10 underside, but I'm not sure yet. I'll let you know, of course. So anyway, that's the inspiration behind the Junkyard motor. This is the latest update of it right here. And I really apologize for making these videos as long as I do. I know that sometimes that's you know, something that annoys people, but hey, you know what? You're not gonna get any shortcuts from me. So, all right, well, like, subscribe, come back, browse through the video if you got. Push the thing forward and listen to what you want and eliminate what you don't. It's up to you. But I do appreciate you coming over here and checking it out. And hopefully you've got some ideas of your own, some stories of your own. And I'd be definitely love to hear them and or listen to them. Okay? Thank you much. We'll talk to you next time.